Hello, welcome to the first part of a three-part mini-series, Bike Reviews by Alex. I find myself often wondering what bike is best for the average rider and figured this video might be beneficial for a few other people as well. Gravel riding has been increasing in popularity, and I feel like there are a lot of nuances in the sport where some people are looking for a mountain bike that can get them to the trail in a faster way than potentially a full suspension could. Some people pack their bikes full of gear and go on multi-day adventures where they're camping and need to take a lot of stuff. Others are looking for really additional routes that the road potentially couldn't offer. So really speed off the road. I have three bikes currently that I think fit into a few of those categories. The bikes I'll be reviewing and comparing are a Cervelo Aspero, a Santa Cruz Stigmata, and an Ibis Hakka MX. As far as bikes I've owned in the past, I had an S-Works Diverge. I also had a 3T Exploro. The S-Works Diverge was the newest model with the Future Shock, and the Exploro was the post-mount version from 2 years ago. As a 5'10" rider, the Aspero I'll be testing is a 54 centimeter. The Ibis Hakka MX is a 55 centimeter, and the Stigmata is also a 54 centimeter. Personally, I have shorter legs and a longer torso, so do like typically to be stretched out a little bit more over the top tube. I understand that's not the same for everybody, but as we get into each of the bikes, I'll talk about that a little more. One thing, I do build up all my own bikes, so if you're interested in a bike build video on how I put any of these together, I'm happy to post that. Just leave something in the comments. Also, if you have any questions, love to interact with my viewers, so please fire away. You can also find me on Strava, look for Alex Biller, and hope to build a community. All right, I just got back from ride number one on the Hakka MX. It was fun. Bike was fast. First impressions are that the frame is definitely stiff enough to be a road bike if you want something that can do it all with different tires. It also made me realize that I'm actually going to have to do probably 5 reviews instead of 3 reviews. So I'm going to compare the Hakka MX in 650B with the Stigmata in 650B. The reason I'm not including the Aspero in that test is because the Aspero can't go quite as wide with tires, and I currently have 2.1 inch tires on the rims right now, set up tubeless, so I really don't want to go through all of that just to switch over to 48 mil tires. Don't think that's really necessary. Plus, at 48 mil, I think it would drop the bottom bracket too low for my liking. So, first review on the Ibis Hakka MX, set up 650B. Bike was fun. Compared to the bikes I've ridden before, which would be the Diverge and the Exploro, felt more like the Exploro in terms of its stiffness. Definitely a rigid bike. I would have expected it to be a little more compliant, especially with the 650 tires. I will say that I've been experimenting with different pressures. I was running it at 30 PSI at first, actually went to 35 PSI. Reason being is that I felt that at 30, when I was going on descents, if I had to do mixed terrain on road, the tires would move a little bit too much for my liking. Granted, I'm coming from a road bike pedigree, not a mountain bike pedigree. So, you might choose to ride a slightly lower pressure, maybe something in the middle at 32 or 33 could be the sweet spot, but right now I'm riding it at 35. I am going to try to compare all of the bikes in identical form. So I will actually take the wheel set that was on the Hakka and put it on the Stigmata when I test that bike. I'll also give you a little bit of background about the loop. I did about 2,600 feet of climbing, so a good mix of climbs and descents. The climbs tend to be longer, mostly fire roads. One of the climbs I did had a stair section and slightly more rugged terrain. Over that, again, I did get jostled around a little bit. Might be due to the pressure, but the bike did feel stiff. On descents, I did notice some hand fatigue, which is one thing that I liked about the Diverge specifically with that Future Shock, that I felt like it added some compliance on the descents. Other than that, the wheelbase is a little bit longer on the Hakka, which I liked. I think it made the bike more stable down the descent. I definitely felt the bike picked up speed very, very well, maintained speed very well. Around the corners, that wheelbase did mean that the bike didn't necessarily want to turn as quickly as I might have liked. I will compare it to the other bikes as well. I'm riding the Aspero in 700C, so I don't think that's quite fair, but I will do a direct comparison of the Stigmata and let you know exactly how it correlates to the Ibis. The one thing about the Ibis is that it's more of a traditional tube shape rather than one with significantly dropped chainstays or compact geometry. What this means is it actually has the most seat tube of any of the three bikes. And with all that seat tube and a top tube that's relatively horizontal, the standover height of the bike is the greatest. So being that I have shorter legs, I have a 30-inch inseam. There was one section where I had to hop off quickly, and needless to say, I was very close to hurting an area that I would not want to hurt, let's put it that way. It'll be interesting to see how the Stigmata feels with, again, a slightly lower top tube and a lower standover height, and then the Aspero as well. But I would say if you were one with shorter legs, that's one thing to consider with the Hakka. It also means that I couldn't show very much seat tube, as you can see from some of the images. And what that means is there's not a lot of flex in the seat tube. So I will say that from a seated position, even though I do have a Ritchie ProLogic flex seat post, I wasn't getting a lot of flex in that. So I would say look for a saddle that has some compliance built in, because at least for me, with the seat tube being so low, I wasn't getting a lot of flex in that tube itself. First impressions are that having that granny gear is nice. I would say my background's entirely in Di2. All the gravel bikes up to this point have been Di2 with a mix of Ultegra or Dura-Ace shifters and XT or XTR in the rear. I did like having that extra gear. I will say I was playing around with chain rings, and I think I came up with what I like the most. So up front, I have a SRAM Red Axis power meter crankset with a 44 tooth ring. In the back, I have the Eagle cassette with a 1050 range. Many people go with a 42 or maybe even a 40 up front. I found that that 1-to-1 at 42 before it makes the leap to the 50 was a little bit too easy for me. And I could have used a little bit more gear. So having the 44 to the 42 ratio and then having the 44 to the 50 for when I need a bailout was really nice. And at the other end of the spectrum, going downhills, 44-10 was real nice. I never ran out of gearing when I was going down my descents. All right, it's like the Oscars up in here. Figured I'd see how many wardrobe changes I could do in a single bike video. Anyways, figured this might make some more sense. I'll just show you the bike and talk a little bit about it. I'll also talk a little bit more about my route. So I'm using a lap function on a Garmin 530. That way I can make sure that each time I'm reviewing bikes, it's exactly the same route. Now, I say exactly, but one caveat with gravel is that you could do the same route 100 times and never get the same exact line. The conditions also changed. It was a bit foggy, a bit damp. So the ground was a little bit more compact than it might be on some other warmer days where the topsoil is a little looser, but I'm gonna do my best. So the route that I did was 13.5 miles, just over an hour of work. My average speed on the Ibis was 12.53 miles per hour with a maximum speed of 40.47. Again, I'm using power, so my average was 232 watts with a maximum of 571. Normalized power, which is when I'm not coasting, was 297 watts. I was trying to keep things about 300. I'm going to try to do that on each of the bikes as far as effort is concerned.
My cadence on this bike was an average of 81 RPM with a maximum of 108 RPM. And my heart rate shifted between 148 beats per minute on average to a maximum of 172. Now, keep in mind that this 13 and a half miles that I did had about 2,300 feet of climbing. So decent uphill pitch, and it says I burned 900 calories. So that's a little bit about the route. Again, I'm gonna do that same route. Turn this off so I don't get any beeps. I'm gonna do that same route with each bike and compare my figures, my speed, my power. I'll talk a little bit about how the effort felt with each video. So on this one, the effort honestly felt pretty easy. I think it comes down to the rigidity of the frame. As you can see here, not showing a lot of seat post, again, reduces the amount of flex I can have. Now, talking about the parts of the bike, we're gonna start from the front. SRAM Red Access shifters, Easton EC70 AX bar. I got a 100 mil NV stem on here. Now, I'm running 170 millimeter SRAM Red Access cranks with the Cork power meter and a 44 tooth ring. Again, I have shorter legs. I tend to like shorter cranks. So on this bike, I have 170s. On my road bike, I actually ride 167 5s. SRAM XX1 Eagle rear derailleur and a Eagle gold cassette. Going to the wheels, you'll see I have last year's DT Swiss XMC 1200s 27.5. I find that these are a good wheel with a solid 24 mil internal width. The nice thing about last year's models, you can get them from a pretty good deal right now. This pair of wheels weigh 1,370 grams on my scale, so a super light carbon wheel. From a tire perspective, I've got the Racing Ralph on the rear, and I got the Rocket Ron on the front. You like a little more grip on the front tire, with the back tire being slightly faster. I was going Thunderbirds before, but I found that the Thunderbirds didn't offer quite enough grip, and I felt a little washy, especially on descents. So I like these a little bit more. The weight penalty was maybe 50 grams, so completely worth it in my opinion. From saddle, I got the WTB Volt Team saddle with the titanium rails. Obviously you can go lighter with the carbon, but the price jump was pretty significant. Finally, I got 160 mil rotors front and back, and my bottle cage is, I don't know what my bottle cage is, but it's a typical non-carbon. I think it weighs 30 grams. As mentioned, the entire bike weighs about 18.3 pounds. So not super light, but light enough. By comparison, my 3T Explorer with Di2 was about a pound lighter. Now, I think it's a combination of the frame, but also Di2, as well as the cranks that I was running on that bike was significantly lighter. These cranks come in at 650 grams with power. On my other bikes, I had always run the Easton EC90 SL crank with power. That came in at about 525 grams. So a good 80 gram difference between the two. Now, the nice thing about the Quark is it is dual-sided, so I figured I would trade 80 grams for additional power data so I can make sure I'm outputting with both my legs. Pedals, Candy ones by Crank Brothers. I like them because they have a little bit of a platform, keeps my foot a little more stable.
Well, that concludes the first in what's now a 5-part series about these 3 bikes. As I mentioned, I plan on comparing the Ibis and the Stigmata directly in 650B form, and then the Ibis, the Stigmata, and the Aspero all against each other in 700C. I think it'll be interesting to see not only how the bikes compare with each other, but to provide insight on 650B versus 700C on the exact same bikes. We hear a lot today in the gravel world from a marketing standpoint about all these different wheel types and all these different tire types and all these different group sets, and I think applying this in the real world will be really interesting, if not just for me, hopefully for you as well. If you like this video and you want to see more of these, please like and subscribe. Also feel free to put in the comments anything additional that you'd like me to review, whether it's parts, components, additional bikes. Let me know, and hope you're out there enjoying some rides as well.